The crystal chandeliers of the obsidian court cast fractured light across marble floors, so black they reflected like still water. Elena moved through these corridors at 4 in the morning, when the ancient halls held their breath between night and dawn, when the vampires retreated to their private chambers and left their world for her to tend. Her cleaning cart's wheels whispered against stone that had seen centuries pass, and she was grateful for the solitude. She had learned, in her 3 months working here, that invisibility was safety. The elite members of this private club, though she knew what they truly were, had known since her second night when she'd seen Lord Castellan move too fast for human eyes, did not notice the hired help. She was wallpaper, a ghost who scrubbed their toilets and polished their ancient artifacts and kept her head down and her daughter fed. The paycheck was extraordinary. Enough to cover Lily's medical bills, the new apartment, the private school that kept her 7-year-old safe, while Elena worked these graveyard shifts. Enough that Elena didn't ask questions about the members who never appeared in daylight, about the blood-red wine that stained crystal glasses with a viscosity too thick for grapes, about the portraits lining the walls that depicted people she'd seen walking these halls looking not a day older. She cleaned. She left. She survived. It was more than she'd had in the 2 years since Lily's father had decided a sick child and struggling wife weren't part of his 5-year plan. Tonight, the silence felt different. Heavier. Elena paused outside the private study reserved for Kieran Ashford, and the name alone sent cold recognition down her spine. She'd never seen him. He occupied the club during hours when she wasn't permitted inside, and the other staff spoke of him in hushed tones usually reserved for natural disasters or debt collectors. The Vampire King, though no one used that title to his face. The original, the first. The one who'd supposedly walked the earth for over 2,000 years and ruled the vampire world with absolute authority, tempered by something the older Janitor called Old God Fairness. Elena didn't know what that meant. She knew only that his study was on her rotation tonight, and her supervisor had been very clear. Clean quickly, touch nothing unnecessarily, and for God's sake, don't wake him if he's there. The door opened soundlessly under her touch. The study sprawled before her like something from another age. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves crammed with volumes in languages she couldn't name. A massive desk of dark wood that might have been contemporary when Rome fell. Wingback chairs arranged before a fireplace where embers still glowed soft orange. And on the leather sofa near the windows, stretched out with inhuman grace, lay a man who made her breath catch and stick in her throat. Kieran Ashford looked like death's most beautiful lie. Even in apparent sleep, he held a terrible elegance. His body arranged with the kind of careless perfection that spoke of centuries learning to occupy space. Dark hair fell across a face too symmetrical to be real. All sharp cheekbones and a mouth that even relaxed suggested both cruelty and something darker. He wore black on black, and his skin held the pale luminescence of something that hadn't seen sun in longer than most countries had existed. One hand rested on his chest, the other draped toward the floor, and she could see rings on those long fingers, silver and old, carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. Elena's pulse hammered. She should leave. Come back later. Add this room to tomorrow's rotation. But her supervisor's face rose in her memory. The woman's sharp warning that Mr. Ashford's study had to be maintained on schedule, that he was particular about his space, that disappointing him was not survivable in any career sense. The study needed cleaning. Ash from the fireplace dusted the hearth. Books lay scattered on the side tables. His position suggested deep sleep, That death-like rest she'd heard vampires fell into during daylight hours, even if they were old enough to resist it. She could do this, quick and quiet. He'd never know she'd been here. Elena began with the periphery, emptying the small waste bin lined with what looked like expensive handwritten letters someone had shredded with what must have been their bare hands. She moved like she'd learned to move in her childhood home when her stepfather was drunk. Liquid silence, weight distributed, breathing controlled. The vacuum stayed on the cart. She used the hand brush for the hearth, collecting ash into a dustpan with movements so gradual they barely qualified as motion. Before I continue with this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video if you want more stories like this. Write in the comments which city you're watching from, and then we'll continue with the story. The books she gathered with careful hands, checking their spines before returning them to their places on the shelves. Several were in Latin. One appeared to be Sumerian. She tried not to wonder if he'd learned these languages when they were still spoken daily. 30 minutes in, she'd established a rhythm. The study revealed itself as she worked. Organized chaos. Everything placed with purpose, even if that purpose wasn't immediately clear. A chess set on a side table showed a game in progress, one side clearly losing. Papers covered his desk in careful stacks, and she didn't touch those beyond dusting around them. A decanter of something ruby dark sat on the bar cart, and she absolutely did not think about what it contained. The temperature in the room felt wrong, colder than the hallway, as if his presence drew heat from the air itself. She was polishing the mirror above the mantel when she saw him in the reflection, still motionless, still apparently deep in whatever passed for vampire sleep. But something had shifted, some quality to his stillness that she couldn't name. Elena froze with the cloth against the glass, her own reflection pale and wide-eyed beside the mirror's ornate frame. She studied him in the silver surface, this ancient thing pretending to be human, and felt the weight of his age like pressure against her skin. He could kill her without effort, without thought. She'd seen Lord Castellan lift a marble statue one-handed, had watched Lady Morgana move across a room faster than Elena could track. And they spoke of Kieran Ashford the way wolves might speak of winter. Inevitable, absolute, to be respected and feared in equal measure. If he woke angry at her presence, there would be no time to explain. No running. Just the moment of realization, and then nothing at all. And Lily would wake up tomorrow in her borrowed bed at Elena's sister's apartment and ask where Mommy was, and no one would have a good answer. Her hand trembled. The cloth squeaked against glass. In the mirror, Kieran Ashford didn't move. Elena forced breath into her lungs and continued cleaning. What else could she do? Leave the job half-finished and risk her supervisor's wrath? Risk the paycheck that kept Lily in doctors and medicine? She'd survived worse than fear. She'd held her daughter through seizures, had sold everything she owned to cover hospital bills, had learned that courage was just terror that kept moving forward. This was just another moment requiring that particular kind of bravery, the mundane heroism of a single mother doing what had to be done. She moved to dust the bookshelves, and her path took her closer to the sofa, close enough to see details she'd missed from across the room. His chest didn't rise or fall, no breath, no heartbeat visible at his throat. He looked carved from marble and shadow, and if she didn't know better, she'd think him a remarkably lifelike statue positioned for dramatic effect. But she did know better. This was simply what vampires looked like when they stopped pretending to be human, when they let the truth of their nature show. Death wearing a beautiful face, stillness so complete it became its own kind of movement. Something on the floor near his trailing hand caught the light. Elena bent down, squinting in the dimness, and her breath stopped. A ring. One of his rings had apparently slipped from his finger and lay on the floor just beneath the sofa's edge, silver glinting against dark wood. She stared at it. Her instructions had been clear. Touch nothing unnecessarily. But was leaving a ring on the floor touching nothing? If he woke and found it missing from his hand, found it dusty and forgotten under furniture, would that be worse? Elena crouched slowly, her knees protesting the movement. Up close, he was even more inhuman. His skin so pale she could see the faint map of veins beneath it, dark blue like ink under paper. His hand lay utterly relaxed, and she could see where the ring had come from. A slight indentation on his middle finger, a space in the collection of bands that circled those long digits. It must have loosened somehow. Vampire sleep was supposed to be absolute, the body shutting down completely. Maybe that affected even small things like muscle tension, holding jewelry in place. She reached for the ring. Her fingers closed around cool silver, and the metal seemed to pulse once against her palm with a feeling like very old lightning, like touching something that remembered empires. Symbols covered its surface, a language she didn't recognize, though one mark looked almost like an eye. She straightened carefully, the ring clutched in her fist, and looked at the sleeping vampire king with her heart trying to punch through her ribs. Putting it on the table seemed wrong. Leaving it near him felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. Elena made a decision born of the same instinct that had kept her and Lily alive through the worst years. When in doubt, do the kind thing. She moved to his desk, found a small wooden box that appeared designed for such items, and placed the ring carefully inside. She positioned the box prominently on the desk's corner, where he'd see it immediately. Then she wrote a quick note on a sticky pad she'd found in the drawer, her handwriting cramped and practical. Found on floor by sofa. Didn't want it lost or damaged. Cleaning staff. There. Done. He'd know it hadn't been stolen, would see someone had taken care of his belonging. Maybe he'd never notice. Maybe he'd be angry anyway. But she'd done what felt right, what felt honest. And that was all she had left these days. Honesty and effort, and the grim determination to keep showing up. The rest of the cleaning passed in tense silence. She finished the study with meticulous attention, checking every surface twice, making sure nothing was disturbed beyond necessity. When she finally backed out of the room, pulling the door shut with a soft click, she felt like she'd been holding her breath for an hour. Maybe she had. The hallway seemed bright and warm compared to that cold study with its sleeping monster, and Elena leaned against her cart for a moment. Just breathing, just being grateful to be away. She finished her shift in a daze, the other rooms blurring together. By the time she clocked out at 7, dawn was breaking over the city, and she drove home through streets painted gold and pink, toward her daughter and breakfast and the illusion of normalcy. She didn't let herself think about the ring, the note, the vampire who might wake and find evidence of her honesty. That was a problem for future Elena. Present Elena just needed coffee and to see Lily smile. The text came 3 days later while she was helping Lily with homework at the kitchen table. An unknown number. Elena almost deleted it without reading. Probably spam, probably something wanting money she didn't have. But something made her thumb hover over the preview, and she opened it to find 5 words. That stopped her heart. The study. Tonight. K.A. Lily looked up from her math worksheet, catching something in Elena's face. "Mommy, are you okay? You look scared." Elena forced a smile, forced normalcy into her voice even as ice flooded her veins. "I'm fine, baby. Just work stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." She kissed Lily's forehead and texted her sister, arranging last-minute babysitting with hands that wanted to shake. The study. He wanted to see her. She'd done something wrong. That had to be what this meant. You didn't summon the help for a friendly chat. You summoned them to fire them, or worse. And with vampires, there was always worse. That night, Elena entered the obsidian court through the staff entrance with her stomach in knots and her mind racing through worst-case scenarios. She'd worn her nicest jeans and a clean sweater, the closest thing to professional she owned that wasn't her cleaning uniform. The halls felt different at this hour, still populated, vampires and their human companions moving through spaces that Elena usually saw empty. Eyes tracked her as she walked, predatory and curious, and she kept her gaze down and her path direct. The study door loomed before her like a gallows. She knocked, once, soft, her knuckles barely making sound against the wood. "Enter." His voice came through the door like smoke, cultured and cold and absolutely in command. Elena pushed into the room and found him at his desk, very much awake, his dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made every instinct scream to run. He looked different, animated, more dangerous, more present, reality bending slightly around him like heat shimmer. He gestured to the chair across from him with one elegant hand, and she noticed the ring back on his finger, silver bright against pale skin. "Sit, please." Not a request, despite the courtesy. She sat, perching on the chair's edge, ready to bolt or beg or whatever the moment required. Kieran Ashford studied her with the kind of attention that felt like being dissected, and she fought not to squirm under that ancient gaze. Finally he spoke, his words measured and precise. "You found my ring?" "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she'd hoped. "I didn't want it to get lost or stepped on. I put it somewhere safe." "You left a note. I wanted you to know it wasn't stolen, that it was just on the floor, that I was trying to help." The words tumbled out faster now, defensive despite her best efforts. "I'm sorry if I touched something I shouldn't have. I was trying to do the right thing." Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but a decrease in intensity that felt like reprieve. He leaned back in his chair, and the movement had that liquid grace they all possessed. "The right thing," he repeated, tasting the words. "Do you know how rare that is, Elena Morrison? In my world, in any world worth examining?" She blinked. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. He probably knew everything about her. Background checks, employment history, her daughter's medical records. The thought should have terrified her. Somehow it just made her tired. "I'm just trying to do my job well. I need this job. My daughter needs this job." Lily, 7 years old. Epilepsy, well controlled with medication you can barely afford. He said it matter-of-factly. Not cruel, but not gentle either. Just facts, laid out like cards. "You've been here 3 months. In that time, you've received exactly 0 complaints. Your work is thorough. You ask no questions. You see us for what we are and don't run screaming or try to sell your story to tabloids." "I need the money," Elena said simply. "And what you are isn't my business. You've never hurt me or threatened my daughter. That's more than I can say for most humans I've known." Kieran Ashford smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Brutal honesty. "I was testing you, you understand. That night, I was awake. I wanted to see what you'd do when presented with temptation. That ring is worth approximately $40,000. Old Roman silver, spelled by a witch in Constantinople. Irreplaceable. You could have taken it, sold it, solved your financial problems for several years. The cold that swept through Elena wasn't surprise. Some part of her had known, had sensed the wrongness in his stillness. You were testing me, she repeated flatly. You pretended to be asleep to see if I'd steal from you. I test everyone eventually. It's how you survive 2 millennia. By knowing who around you has integrity and who has only circumstances keeping them honest. He tilted his head, studying her. You're angry. I'm insulted. The words were out before she could stop them, before fear could reassert control. But she was tired of being afraid, tired of swallowing every emotion to keep her head down. I've worked hard for 3 months. I've been nothing but professional and honest. And you decided to play games to catch me being human and fallible. Yes, I'm angry. I'm also smart enough to know that being angry at you is probably very stupid. So I apologize for my tone. The silence that followed felt like standing on ice waiting for it to crack. Then Kieran laughed, a short, sharp sound of genuine surprise. Don't apologize. Your anger is justified, and your honesty is why you're here. He stood, moving to the window, his back to her. I have a problem, Elena. Someone on my staff is stealing from me. Small things at first. Artifacts, documents. Now larger thefts, valuable items. I've narrowed the suspects to the cleaning and service staff with access to private areas. I needed to eliminate you from that list. Understanding dawned slowly. So you tested me. I tested you. You passed. More than passed. You went beyond what duty required. You protected my property and left evidence of your integrity. That's exceedingly rare. He turned back to face her, and in the window's reflection she saw him limned, in city lights, ancient and terrible and somehow deeply tired. I'm offering you a position. Not cleaning, though the pay will be similar initially. I need someone I can trust to move through these spaces, to watch, to listen. The other staff will talk around you because they're used to you being invisible. You'll report directly to me. Elena's mind reeled. You want me to spy on my co-workers. I want you to help me catch a thief who's not just stealing objects but selling information about my people to hunters. Who's putting every vampire in this court at risk. His voice went colder. 3 of my people have narrowly avoided assassination attempts in the past month. Someone's providing schedules, locations, vulnerabilities. This isn't about property anymore, Elena. This is about survival. She thought of the vampires she'd seen in these halls. Lord Castellan with his dry wit and reading glasses. Lady Morgana, who always thanked her quietly when they passed. The young couple, probably only decades old, who'd once asked her opinion on paint colors for their apartment. People in their way. Strange and dangerous, but people nonetheless. And someone was hunting them. Someone was using their trust, their space, to set them up for murder. She thought of Lily, of the job that kept them fed and housed, of the risk of involving herself in vampire politics, of what this vampire king might do if she refused. She thought of her own reflection in countless mirrors, invisible and forgettable, and trying so desperately to be good in a world that punished goodness. What do you need me to do? Elena asked, and watched something like respect flicker across Kieran Ashford's ancient face. The next week reshaped her understanding of the Obsidian Court and everyone in it. Kieran provided her with a list of suspects, 7 staff members with the right access and opportunity. He taught her what to look for: unusual wealth, nervous behavior, unexplained absences, He gave her a phone that looked normal but was encrypted beyond anything human technology offered, told her to text him anything suspicious, no matter how small. And he raised her pay enough that Elena could afford Lily's medications without the constant calculator work, could buy her daughter new shoes without panic. She moved through her shifts differently now, eyes open, attention sharp. The other cleaners assumed her unchanged schedule meant nothing had changed. They didn't know she was watching, listening, piecing together fragments of conversation and unusual patterns. It felt wrong and necessary in equal measure, this betrayal of people she'd worked alongside for months. But when she thought of assassins, of the young vampire couple whose apartment she cleaned, she pushed through the discomfort. Marcus, the night porter, had expensive new boots. Jennifer from housekeeping kept stepping outside for hushed phone calls. David, who handled the main hall, had started avoiding certain rooms, certain hours. Elena documented everything, sent detailed texts to Kieran's encrypted line, and tried not to think about what would happen when they found their thief. 2 weeks in, working late in the archives, she found it. A stack of copied documents hidden behind old ledgers, papers that detailed member schedules, security protocols, residential addresses. Her hands shook as she photographed them with the special phone. The handwriting looked familiar. She'd seen it on work schedules, on shift swap requests. David. It was David. She texted Kieran immediately. The response came within seconds. "Don't confront. Get out safely. I'm coming." But she wasn't alone in the archives anymore. The door that had been open now stood closed, and David emerged from behind a shelf with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elena, didn't expect anyone down here tonight. Thought you were doing the 3rd floor. Changed my route." She kept her voice casual, her posture relaxed despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. "Just grabbing some supplies Mrs. Chen asked for." "Right. Supplies." He moved closer, and she saw the calculation in his face, the moment he decided she was a problem requiring solution. "How much did you see?" "I don't know what you mean." "Back away slowly, toward the other door. Don't run. Running triggers the predator response even in humans." "The papers, the documents." "Don't play stupid, Elena. You're actually pretty smart. I've noticed you watching this past week. Couldn't figure out why until now." His smile turned ugly. "You're working for him. For Ashford. He suspected something, didn't he? Used you to confirm it." "David, whatever you're involved in, it's not too late to stop. Just put the documents back. Leave. You don't have to do this." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "You have no idea what you're talking about. These monsters killed my sister, drained her, and left her in an alley like trash. You think they're people? You think they deserve your protection?" He pulled something from his jacket. A knife, silver-edged, meant for killing vampires, but perfectly capable of killing her. "I'm sorry. I like you. But I've come too far to let you ruin this." Elena had grown up learning to read violence in a man's stance. She saw him decide, saw the shift from threat to commitment. And she moved, not away but toward, inside his reach before he could extend fully, her hand grabbing for his wrist with every ounce of strength she possessed. They crashed into the shelves, old paper flying, her knee coming up toward his groin in a move learned from a self-defense class she'd taken after Lily's father left. The knife clattered across the floor. David's fist caught her cheekbone, and stars exploded across her vision. Then he was flying backward, torn away from her by hands that moved too fast to see. Elena collapsed against the shelf, gasping, and watched through watering eyes as Kieran Ashford held David suspended in the air by his throat. The vampire's face transformed into something from nightmares. Not anger. That would have been more human. This was the cold focus of an apex predator, ancient and absolute. "You dare," Kieran said softly, "to harm what's under my protection? To betray my hospitality and patience with this?" He shook David once, negligently, and Elena heard bones crack. "You'll tell me everything. Who you work for, who you've sold to, every member you've compromised." The words held no room for refusal, just eternal winter promising nothing but truth. David tried to speak. Failed. Kieran loosened his grip fractionally. "The Brotherhood," David gasped. "Eastern European cell. They paid me to provide intel, copies of everything. They're planning a coordinated strike. Multiple cities. All your people." He choked off as the grip tightened again. Elena pushed herself upright, every muscle screaming. Her face throbbed where David had hit her, and she tasted copper. But she was alive. She'd survived. Kieran glanced at her, and his expression flickered, fury giving way to something almost like concern, though it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "Get medical attention," he told her, his voice returning to its usual controlled tones even as he held a man like he weighed nothing. "Go to Dr. Reeves. She handles staff injuries. Tell her I sent you. Then go home to your daughter. You've done well." She wanted to ask what would happen to David. Wanted to protest that even thieves, even traitors deserved trials and justice rather than the summary judgment in Kieran's eyes. But the words dried in her throat because she'd seen those copied documents, had read the assassination schedules, had understood that David's betrayal would have resulted in mass murder. And she was tired. So tired. And her face hurt. And she needed to know Lily was safe. Elena gathered her phone and bag with shaking hands and walked out of the archives without looking back. Behind her, she heard David start to beg. She kept walking. Dr. Reeves turned out to be a vampire herself, ancient and efficient, who examined Elena's injuries with cool hands and cooler professionalism. "Bruising, no fracture. You'll heal fine. Ice and ibuprofen." She handed Elena a cold pack and a prescription bottle. "And this, from Ashford. He said you'd try to refuse." She pressed an envelope into Elena's hand. "Don't. He doesn't make gestures lightly." The envelope contained a check with enough zeros that Elena had to count them twice. More money than she made in 6 months. A note in sharp handwriting read, "Hazard pay. Your courage ensured the safety of 23 people. That has value. K.A." Elena drove home as dawn broke, her face aching and her mind churning. She paid the babysitter triple because she'd gone past the agreed-upon time. Climbed into bed with Lily, who murmured sleepily and curled against her side, small and warm and alive. And Elena let herself cry quietly, processing fear and violence and the strange gratitude of survival, until exhaustion finally dragged her under. The text came the next afternoon. "Status meeting. Tonight if you're able. Understand if you need more time." Elena stared at it. She could quit. Should quit. She'd done what Kieran needed. Found his traitor. Nearly died for it. Taken her substantial payment. She could find other work. Safer work. Work that didn't involve vampire politics and betrayal and knives in the dark. But Lily needed specialists. Needed medications. Needed stability. And beneath the practical calculations ran something else. She'd been good at this. She'd helped save lives. She'd mattered in a way that transcended invisibility. She texted back, "I'll be there, 8 p.m. His response was immediate. 8. Study. Thank you, Elena. That night she returned to the obsidian court, with her face still bruised, with her daughter safely at her sister's apartment, with her heart hammering but her shoulders straight. She knocked on the study door, entered when called, found Kieran at his desk, looking tired in a way she didn't think vampires could look tired, papers scattered before him. Elena. He stood, gestured to the chair. She sat. He remained standing, studying her with those dark eyes that had seen empires rise and crumble. How are you? Sore. Alive. Better than David. David is being handled according to our laws. He'll face justice from both vampire authorities and human law enforcement for the assassinations he helped coordinate. A pause. 3 people are dead because of his information. Another 5 were injured in attacks. You stopped it from being worse. Much worse. Elena nodded slowly. The Brotherhood. They're real? They'll try again? They're real. They've existed in various forms for centuries, and yes, they'll try again. Which is why I need people I can trust. People with integrity who see clearly and act bravely. He moved around the desk, leaning against its edge, closer to her now. I'm offering you a permanent position, Elena. Security consultant. You'll train with my people, learn what to look for, how to identify threats. You'll have resources, backup, protection. The pay is... He named a figure that made her dizzy, and includes full medical coverage for you and Lily. Private specialists if needed. It was everything. More than everything. Financial security, respect, purpose, and all she had to do was live in this shadow world, risk herself again and again, trust this ancient vampire who tested her like she was a potential problem to be eliminated. Why me? The question emerged raw. You have people, trained people, vampires who are stronger, faster, harder to kill. Kieran smiled slightly. Because you did the right thing when no one was watching. Because you saw a ring on the floor and chose integrity over opportunity. Because when faced with a killer, you fought instead of freezing. Because you're clever and observant, and you understand fear without being paralyzed by it. He paused. Because I've lived over 2,000 years, Elena, and I've learned that power and skill can be taught, but character cannot. You have character. That's infinitely more valuable. She thought of Lily asking where Mommy went every night. Thought of the danger, the impossibility of this world. Thought of being invisible her whole life. A ghost moving through other people's spaces without ever claiming her own. Thought of Kieran's ring left somewhere safe. Her note explaining honestly what happened. Such a small thing. Such an enormous difference. I have conditions, Elena said, meeting his gaze. Lily's safety is guaranteed. If there's ever a threat to her, you get us out. No questions, no delays. She comes first. Always. Agreed. I need 1 day off per week. Actual off, not on call. Time to be her mother without distractions. Agreed. And I need to know, really know, that what we're doing is right. That we're protecting people who deserve protection, not monsters hiding behind power. Kieran's expression turned serious. I can't promise that everyone in my world is worthy of protection. Some of my people have done monstrous things. Some still do. But the Brotherhood doesn't discriminate. They'd kill the artist who hasn't harmed anyone in a century, alongside the predator who needs stopping. What we're doing is preventing wholesale slaughter based on species hatred. If there are monsters in my court who need handling, I handle them according to our justice system. Does that satisfy you? It had to. She was too tired for philosophical debates, too practical for perfect moral clarity. Yes. Then welcome to my security team, Elena Morrison. He extended his hand, pale and ring-adorned, and she took it. His grip was cool and firm, and she felt that strange pulse again. Not quite magic, not quite electricity, just something old recognizing something true. Over the following months, Elena's life transformed in ways both mundane and profound. She learned to fight properly, trained by a vampire named Marcus, who'd been a Roman legionnaire and who had patience like continental drift. She learned about vampire politics, the delicate balance of territories and bloodlines, the ancient laws that governed a hidden society. She learned to spot the warning signs of hunters, to identify dangerous humans versus merely curious ones, to move through her world and theirs with equal competence. Lily thrived with the new insurance, her seizures controlled better than ever, her confidence growing as she settled into her school and made friends without the shadow of medical crisis always looming. Elena told her some of what she did, that Mommy helped protect people now, that the job was important and sometimes dangerous but worthwhile. Lily seemed to understand in that uncanny way children sometimes did, asking smart questions and accepting careful answers. And Kieran, he remained her direct supervisor, her point of contact, the ancient mind who decided she was worth trusting. They met regularly to discuss cases, threats, observations. He was demanding and exacting and never praised unnecessarily. But when she did well, he acknowledged it with a nod or a rare smile that felt like winning something. She learned to read his moods, the particular stillness that meant he was thinking, the coldness that meant anger, the almost warmth when he was pleased or surprised. She learned he was fair, ruthlessly so, and that his protection once given was absolute. She learned, too, that he was lonely in the way only immortals could be lonely, watching centuries pass while everyone he cared for aged and died. She saw it in how he looked at the old portraits, in the careful distance he maintained from his own people, in the walls he'd built so high that even showing approval felt like vulnerability. 6 months into her new position, Elena sat in his study going over security footage from a member's apartment complex. Kieran worked across the desk from her, focused on financial records, and the silence between them had become comfortable. These evenings happened often now. She'd drop Lily with her sister, come in for their meetings, and hours would pass in companionable work. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. It was, she realized, the closest thing to friendship she'd had in years. "Can I ask you something personal?" Elena said, not looking up from her tablet. "You can ask. I may not answer." "The test. The ring. Do you regret it? Testing me like that?" Kieran set down his pen. "No. It gave me certainty. But I recognize it was insulting, and I recognize you had every right to your anger. Had our positions been reversed, I'd have been furious. But you wouldn't have said anything. You'd have hidden it. Probably. I've had more practice at hiding." He studied her across the desk. "You wear your emotions very clearly, Elena. It's disconcerting and refreshing in equal measure." She snorted. "Sorry my face doesn't have a 2,000-year-old poker setting." "Don't apologize. Transparency is its own kind of strength. I always know where I stand with you." A pause. "I trust you. Completely. I want you to know that." The words settled between them, weighty and strange. Elena looked up and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name, something between respect and curiosity, and a vulnerability he quickly shuddered. "I trust you too," she said softly, "even though you're terrifying and ancient and could kill me with your pinky finger." I trust you. You've kept every promise, protected Lily, protected me, given me purpose. That means something. It means everything, Kieran said, and for just a moment his control slipped enough that she saw the truth beneath it. The loneliness, the hope, the careful, fragile belief that maybe this time, this person could be different, could stay, could matter without being destroyed by time or violence or the cruel mathematics of mortal spans. Elena smiled. Good, because you're stuck with me now. I'm very stubborn. Ask my daughter. I don't doubt it. He returned to his papers, but something in his posture had relaxed. Something in the air between them had shifted, a wall coming down just slightly, just enough to let light through. Outside, the city moved through its late hours, unaware of the vampires in their courts. The security consultant who'd started as a janitor, the ancient king who'd tested her honesty and found something rare. Inside, Elena worked beside him and thought about trust earned through small acts of integrity, about how courage looked like showing up scared, about how family could be found in the strangest places. If you reached the end, comment down below if you liked the story and want part 2. Thank you for watching.